Alright, so today I want to cover the topic of ball python supers, and if you're not familiar with supers, it's a genetic term, and essentially what it is if you breed two codominant morphs together, 25% of the babies come out with two copies of the gene we call a super. For example, this is a bamboo ball python around my neck. This is Bobby, and he just has one copy of the bamboo gene, and if you breed a bamboo with another bamboo, 25% of the offspring come out as super bamboos. Looks completely different than a bamboo. And the interesting thing about supers is that normally they look completely different than the base mutation with just one copy of the gene. They look completely different. Sometimes it looks completely unexpected compared to what you would expect breeding two of those snakes together. And I would say in most cases, a lot of people, what they do is they'll actually breed like a bamboo to a bamboo and get a bunch of different offspring, some normals, some bamboos, some supers. But what you can actually do is you can breed two supers together and get a whole clutch of supers, which is pretty awesome. If you take something like the blue-eyed leucistic, which is a really popular snake, and you actually bred two of them together, you get a whole clutch of white snakes with blue eyes, which is pretty amazing. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to jump over to the internet and just show you a few of these amazing supers. Alright, so I'm going to jump over here on morphmarket.com and I'm going to show you some of these supers. I'm going to start with the bamboo. And the funny thing is I actually came over here and sorted by all the ones that are for sale and have sold, sorted by the oldest bamboo that have actually sold. And this picture came up. Believe it or not, this is actually a picture of Bobby, the snake that I have around my neck in every video. And it's kind of interesting if you actually look at the ad. I actually bought this for $1,200. I can't believe how much I paid for them. But the thing that really sold me is I actually bought a whole collection of females. I was looking for something to breed to a bunch of those females. I was looking for a bamboo that was ready to breed, and this one popped out. The thing that really sold me on this one was the really high contrast on the snake. I've never really seen a bamboo as so impressive as this one, and that's what really sold me on it. It was really hard to come up with that kind of money early in my ball python career, but I thought it was interesting that after all this time, the picture of Bobby still remains over here on Morph Market. I thought that was kind of interesting. So if you actually take a bamboo and breed it with another bamboo, and I've actually produced quite a few female bamboos over the years, but I haven't actually kept one. I pretty much sold them all, so I don't really have any super bamboos, but this is what you would produce if you actually bred two of the bamboos together. It is a really beautiful, really bright white snake with bright blue eyes, which is everybody's favorite snake. And I would say if you're actually breeding for super bamboos or bamboo combos, you can actually produce the similar snakes if you have like a bamboo lesser or a bamboo Mojave or anything in the blue-eyed leucistic, like the super lessers and super Mojaves. They all look exactly like this. It's pretty amazing. But the problem is if you have bamboo in the mix, then unless you're actually buying that snake to breed, it's a really hard sell. So for example, this super bamboo actually sold for $4,000, quite a bit of money. Of course, this was a couple years ago. This was back in 2017, and back then bamboos were a little more exotic, a little more rare. And then of course, when I produce dozens and dozens of bamboos, kind of drives the price down a little bit, increases the availability, and then a lot of people kind of jump on the bandwagon and then start producing bamboos. So it kind of drives the price down a little bit. But back in the day, these were selling for $4,000. And the problem is I found when I was producing my bamboo lessers, which looked exactly like this, I was selling them for like $700 because that's kind of what the market price was for them, because it has the bamboo in there instead of like a super Mojave, which looks exactly like the snake, but you can buy it for $300 or $400. And that is the problem, because a lot of people come to the reptile shows and they be looking for a white snake with blue eyes, and they come up to my table and I have some for $700, and they're like, hey, the guy in that table over there, he's got a white snake with blue eyes and he's selling it for $300. And that's kind of the unless you really intend to breed the snake, if you're just looking for it as a pet, it's kind of a hard sell to produce some of these high-end complexes, especially with the bamboo. But I just thought it was kind of interesting that you take something like the bamboo and you produce the super, it looks completely different than the base morph bamboo. So here's another one that's kind of the complete opposite of the blue-eyed leucistic complex. This is the black pastel, and if you know anything about the black pastel, you can actually make a super and then add it to the recessive pied gene and make the panda pieds, which is a completely black and white snake. Really beautiful snake. And if you actually take two of these, breed them together, 25% of the offspring come out as a super black pastel. And look at this snake. This is amazing. It's almost a complete opposite, completely black snake instead of the completely white. And as a matter of fact, there's a lot of people that have been trying to do the panda pied with different morphs, and there's nothing, I don't think there's any other super combos that get darker black than the super black pastel. Pretty awesome snake. As a matter of fact, this one is a super black pastel het pied, which a lot of people are looking for, trying to work into the panda pied, and just because it's het pied, they bring a lot of money. This one is actually sold for $1,450. Pretty high-end snake. Here's another one. There's actually quite a few genes like Asphalt kind of in this whole complex. There's Asphalt and Gravel, which are really close to each other, and this looks almost like a completely normal snake. It's pretty amazing, and it's funny, some of these genes are like almost sleeper genes. As a matter of fact, if you mix Asphalt with quite a few other combos, unless you really hit the right combos, it's really difficult to see if you actually have Asphalt in the mix. But when you make the super Asphalt, take a look at this. This is pretty amazing. This is the super Asphalt. And most of the time, I'd say most of the people that actually buy something like this are breeding it with other morphs like Yellow Belly and some of the other ones. I'd say the Yellow Belly Asphalt is kind of the number one thing that a lot of people are going for when they get the Asphalt. But I just thought it was interesting that the super Asphalt was really so different than that normal looking snake. And talk about prices. Take a look at the price on this one. This is really crazy. This one is still for sale. $4,000 for a super Asphalt, and really you're paying for the breeding potential. And a lot of people, especially if they have like the highways or the freeways and they start breeding them into things, they don't know if they have the Asphalt Yellow Belly or the Gravel or Yellow Belly because they look almost like normals as a standalone morph, and a lot of times it really takes a trained eye to pick them out. So if you actually had this, the super Asphalt, no matter what you bred this to, every single offspring is going to have Asphalt in it. It's really powerful breeder. It's really powerful that you actually know 100% of the time that you have Asphalt in every single hatchling that comes out of the snake. I would say that is probably the most powerful thing about the super Asphalt. And here is the Yellow Belly. If you actually cross the Asphalt and the Yellow Belly, you get some of the highways and the gravels with the Asphalt, the highways and the freeways with the gravels and the asphalts. It's pretty interesting allelic complex. But the Yellow Belly by itself, if you actually take two Yellow Bellies and breed them together, you get a super Yellow Belly, which is pretty amazing. And I'd say the Yellow Belly is another one that looks almost like a normal. If someone handed me to this snake and asked me, what do you think I think this is, I would say this is probably a normal, because I'm not really familiar with trying to pick out the differences between the two. Some people can pick them out, but I'd say if you handed me the snake, I'd say it looks almost like a normal classic wild type. Here is what the super Yellow Belly looks like. It's another completely white snake, but this time it actually has black eyes. It's not in the blue-eyed leucistic complex. Pretty interesting that you can get a white snake in several different ways. And I would say usually when it comes to the ivories, they're not completely like a really bright white. I'd say this one's a little bit off compared to most of them. I'd say most of the ivories are a little bit dirty of a white. You can see this one kind of has a little color on the head, a little bit yellow down the back, but I'd say if you're looking at a lot of ivories, sometimes they're not quite as bright as some of the snakes in the blue-eyed leucistic. And if you're looking for an inexpensive snake, these are really cheap. These are actually cheaper than the blue-eyed leucistic. This one is for sale for $175. Here is one you've probably seen if you dabbled at all in ball pythons. That is the Pastel, and you can definitely tell this is different than the normal wild type. It has a lot more yellow color, and a lot of times the pattern is reduced quite a bit on the Pastel. Here's what the Super Pastel looks like. The Super Pastel really reduces the pattern even more, and pretty much I found the key for Super Pastels is it really fades out the top of the head in a lot of cases, and a lot of times it also has little bits of highlighting right down the spine of the snake. That's how you can tell the difference between the Super Pastel and Pastels. I actually produced my first Super Pastel this year. It's pretty awesome, and it's one of the hatchlings I have for sale, but I just thought it was interesting that I actually produced my first one-of-a-kind Super Pastel. It was pretty awesome. Here's another gene. I actually had a fire pied that I bought from Justin Kobelka back in the day, and it's actually a male, and I bred it to a normal female, and I actually got some fires like this. Half of the babies came out fire, 100% had pied, and it's kind of interesting. You see that it has a slightly different color to the fire. If you actually breed two fires together, you get 25% of the time you get a super fire, and this is one of my favorite snakes. Take a look at this. This is another white snake, which is pretty awesome. You can get another white snake a different way, but this one has black eyes, and it's a lot cleaner. I think it's a little bit cleaner than the ivories. I'd say it's almost on par with the blue-eyed leucistics as far as a really bright white snake. And the thing I really like about the super fires is a lot of times they have little splotches of yellow right down the spine of the snake, and a lot of the blue-eyed leucistics, sometimes you'll see like a stripe of yellow, but with the super fires you'll actually see the splotches. Sometimes those splotches of yellow on the super fires really are intense. It's pretty amazing combo. And if you're looking at the prices on this, this is about $300, pretty much on par with your blue-eyed leucistic, like your super Mojaves and super lessers that look exactly like the super bamboos. They're just kind of the, I'd say if you're going for an all-white snake with blue eyes and you're really looking to produce a lot of them for market, I think they have a really high demand. I think either your super fires would be good or your blue-eyed leucistic like a super Mojave or the Mojave lesser or the super lesser, something like that. And if you actually bred two in the blue-eyed leucistic together, you can produce whole clutches of them. There's quite a few people at the shows always coming up to my tables and asking, hey, do you have any blue-eyed leucistics for 300 bucks? And there's several ways you can do it. I would say super fire is one way you could actually do it. Here's another one that is not really popular, I'd say, when it comes to ball python morphs. This is what we call the Spark. And the Spark is, you probably heard of Spark. When you cross it with the yellow belly, you get what we know as a Puma. And I haven't really seen a whole lot of Spark combos. It doesn't really seem, as a matter of fact, I haven't really done a morph, kind of a highlight on the Spark. It'd be kind of interesting to see how well it mixes with other genes. But from what I've seen, really, the only kind of the combo that it really shines is when you mix Spark with yellow belly, or if you make a super Spark, and that's what I want to show you in this one. This is the Super Spark, which is pretty amazing that the Super Spark looks like this, because this almost looks exactly like the Spark yellow belly, which is another amazing combo. And it's, I would say, I was kind of looking at some of the Super Sparks and the Pumas, which is the Spark yellow belly. They're almost exactly the same, and it'd be a really powerful breeder, because you could actually breed a Super Spark to just about anything, and everything, all the hatchlings would be Sparks. Versus if you kind of bred it with the yellow belly, and then half the babies would be yellow belly, half the babies would be Spark, and a lot of times you can't tell the difference between just the standalone Spark and the yellow belly. So what a lot of people do is, if they actually take the Puma and breed it to something else, all the hatchlings they'll put, Spark / yellow belly, because they won't really know if it's a Spark or a yellow belly. But in this case, if you use the Super Spark, you would know for sure all the hatchlings would be Spark. So here's another one, spot nose. This is kind of an interesting combo. Works really well with clowns. Almost looks really close to a normal. I'd say in most cases, the key to identifying spot nose is pretty much this little pattern right on the head. It has a really unique head stamp that you can really identify the spot nose in combos or as a standalone morph by this little head stamp. If you actually breed two spot noses together, you get, this is what we call the Powerball, which is the super spot nose. And the funny thing is about the super spot nose is they say it tends to have a head wobble similar to the spider, which is kind of interesting. So a lot of people say if you're looking at Powerballs as a breeder or as a pet, you really want to look at them real close to see if they have any head wobble at all and know what you're getting into before you actually get into them. But I thought it was a really interesting combo. It looks completely different than the base morph. So here is one last ball python morph that I wanted to show you. I thought this picture was kind of interesting. I was looking through the mahoganies, and this I thought not only was this super mahogany really interesting, but this particular snake, it was really interesting to me because I hatched out a dinker ball python that is 50% het pied. You've probably seen it on some of my videos, and it looks exactly like this ball python. I mean, almost exactly color for color, pattern for pattern. This looks like my snake that I hatched out as my dinker project. So I'm starting to think, did I really hatch out maybe a mahogany? That's kind of interesting. It'd be interesting to breed, you know, something I'm actually working to prove it out. I'm not exactly sure if it's genetic or not, but I just thought it was interesting that this snake looks like my dinker project. This is a mahogany. If you actually breed two mahoganies together, this is what you get. This is really amazing. This is what we call the Suma ball python. The Suma is, I would say, a lot of people are trying to do with the black pastel, the same with the Suma. People have done, you know, trying to make the Suma pieds, which is close, but if you look really close at this, it's not really as black as the super pastel. It's kind of almost a really dark, kind of a cinnamon color, really interesting snake. And I would say as a standalone morph, it's really impressive. And I've actually heard through the grapevine that a lot of the dark morphs are really a little bit more bitey, a little bit more snappy and aggressive than some of the other morphs. And a lot of people that have bred a lot of these have commented on their YouTube videos that say every time they produce a black snake with the super black pastel or the Suma, which is the super mahogany, they're a little bit more aggressive. And I'm not really sure you can judge it by a certain color or pattern of snakes. I'd say in some cases it really depends on the individual of the snake, but I've actually heard kind of through the grapevine that some people are saying that these particular snakes are a little bit more aggressive. All right, so it is time for the question of the day. And Steve asks, when I'm doing reptile shows, do I let people handle my snakes? And if so, how do I prevent diseases? And that is a very good question. Essentially, yes, I do let people handle my snakes to a certain point. I know a lot of times, you know, kids will come up and they'll say, hey, can I handle this snake? Can I handle this snake? Can I handle this snake? And usually, you know, kids handling snakes, I'll usually cut them off at 3 snakes. I'll be like, all right, you're going to have to come back in a couple hours if you want to handle another snake. Because people, you know, some of those kids can get a little pesty at the shows, drive you a little bit bonkers. But I'd say in most cases, I let people handle snakes, especially people that have never handled snakes before. It's pretty amazing to see the fear kind of drain away as soon as you hand them a snake. It's completely an amazing experience watching a lot of people that have never touched snakes that maybe have a little bit of fear, and then you hand them a snake, and a lot of times they're like, I had no idea that a snake felt like this. It's really smooth and soft, and they're really, ball pythons in most cases, they won't bite you, and they're really gentle. Pretty amazing animals. And as far as diseases, essentially what I do is I use a lot of hand sanitizer, encourage a lot of hand sanitizers, and I'm thinking hopefully it'll actually kill some of the diseases like the mites and stuff like that. That's pretty much all you can do at a show if you're letting people handle your snakes. Really the only safeguard against it is a lot of hand sanitizer. And I know there's kind of reptile police at the show that really keep an eye on a lot of tables. If they see any mites, they will kick you out of the show. You definitely don't want to come to the show if you have mites in your collection. And if you get caught, you can get kicked out of that show. So that's another good thing. You know, there's a lot of people really watching for diseases, a lot of people that run the shows to make sure there's no diseases in the shows. So that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.